Hi, and welcome to Learning Across Kansas. I'm your host, Cindy Couchman. Learning Across Kansas is a joint partnership between the Kansas State Department of Education and the Kansas Public Broadcasting Service. We're excited to continue education across Kansas in this time where social distancing has become the norm and we're facing health issues across our state. Today's episode is very near and dear to my heart. It's about geometry. As a math teacher, I see math everywhere. Everywhere I look, I see math. And in fact, in the shelter that I'm standing in right now, I see parallel lines, I see perpendicular lines, I see all kinds of mathematics that have happened in order for this shelter to be built. Today, you're going to learn about math from a history teacher, from someone that teaches physics and biology, even how it relates in ELA. So we're going to start with learning about history, and I promise I'm going to try to stay away from some corny math jokes. First up is Kyle Heilman from DeSoto.
Good morning and welcome back. Geometry is a fascinating subject and has been with us for a long time. There was a gentleman in ancient Greece named Euclid, and Euclid started to realize that all of these shapes and spheres and squares and rectangles and basically everything around him were shapes and parts and pieces working together. The simple definition of geometry is understanding shapes and their relationship to each other. For example, if you look at this volleyball, there are 3 separate panels. They all hook together to create a section, and all of those sections sewn together create a volleyball. He started to see this in the structures around him. If you look at this paperweight that's supposed to look like a Greek and Roman temple, the bottom is rectangles stacked on top of each other to create steps. The columns are cylinders, and up on top you have triangles hooked together as well. All of it coming together, shapes working together. You look at the sphere of the Earth. You look at the shapes and orbits of planets and solar systems, galaxies, the universe. You can even see this same pattern inside the molecular structure of atoms and cells and how they move and react to each other. The obelisk or Washington Monument in Washington, D.C., the circle on the face of a clock or a frisbee, literally the marble that they cut into squares and rectangles to build structures with, or spheres, or a pyramid. A pyramid is 4 triangles connected by a base, which is a square. So literally all these shapes work together, and it is amazing how that happens. If you look in your kitchen, your house, your bedroom, your food closet, this is the tube from inside a paper towel roll, which is actually a set of circles stacked on top of each other to create a cylinder. So one of the favorite geometry stories of the world would have to be Archimedes. He's asked to take a crown of solid gold and determine, is it really solid gold? He can't figure out how to do it without tearing it apart or melting it down. And one day when he's taking a bath, the water's filled too high. He sits in the bathtub and it overflows. He instantly realizes he's got a solution, jumps up naked, runs home buck naked, screaming, "Eureka, Eureka, I've got it." And he realizes that he can take the crown, set it into a liquid like water, and measure the overflow, and he'll know the volume of the crown. And if it's solid gold, it would have a certain weight. Take a guess. Yeah, you're right. Somebody had taken some of the gold out for themselves, so the crown was not solid gold. And he proved it using geometry. Geometry's all around us. You're now going to go to Miss Caraballou and find out how it's in the architecture in the cities around us. Have a great day.
We're going to talk about architecture today, and we're going to take a tour of my hometown, Wichita, and see how buildings have been changing over time. Our first set of buildings we're going to look at is libraries. The city of Wichita gained its first public library in 1915 with funds from Andrew Carnegie. In 1967, they built a state-of-the-art library in the brutalist style. It's still a beacon for architects around the world. And in 2018, we just finished the new advanced learning library that has the city of Wichita set up for the 21st century. Next, we're going to look at entertainment spaces. In 1922, the first atmospheric theater was built in the Orpheum Theater here in Wichita, and you can still go to see a show. In 1969, Wichita built Century 2. It's a performing arts and event space. And in 2000, Moshe Safdie was commissioned to build Exploration Place, a science center for all ages. And in 2010, Interest Bank Arena was completed to host sports events, teams, concerts, and all sorts of different events for the city. In 1888, the first courthouse was built. In 1892, they built the old city building, which is now the Wichita-Sedgwick County Historical Museum. In 1932, the federal courthouse was built in the Art Deco style. In 1959, the current courthouse was built, and in 1975, our current city building was built. Wichita is the air capital of the world. Not only our aircraft that are being built, but our Wichita airports. The first one in 1935, the Wichita Municipal Airport, was built, and it was the stopover of the stars. You could go out and see movie stars on any given night because they had to stop overnight before transcontinental flight. In 1954, the Mid-Continent Airport Terminal was built. It has been replaced now in 2018 by the Eisenhower National Airport that welcomes visitors from around the world. Sometimes buildings are built with special purpose, and this is one of my favorites. It's the Kansas Leadership Center. They train people from all over the world in adaptive leadership and help us make progress on really tough issues. We didn't even get to schools. What does your school look like? What kind of buildings are in your community? Ask around. Go explore a little bit. See what's there. What's the history of your community? It's exciting stuff.
Kansas school buildings may be closed for the remainder of the academic year, but school is still in session. Keeping students engaged in the learning process during this extraordinary time is critical for their ongoing success. We salute our teachers, parents, and guardians who are committed to ensuring their students finish this year strong. We're all ready for our lives to get back to normal, but until that time, Kansas students, keep learning and keep working towards your goals. Together, Kansans can.
Thank you, Karen Kyle. Learning about the history of mathematics is very special, especially being a math teacher. And the architecture, I see math and architecture everywhere I look. One of my favorite buildings is our Capitol at Washington, D.C. Inside the Capitol is the rotunda that is in the shape of an ellipse. And an ellipse has two foci points. At one foci point, you can speak into that area on the floor, and it can be heard yards away from another person standing at the other foci of the ellipse. Speaking of ellipses, we're going to go to Stan Burkamp in Mays, Kansas, where he's going to tell us about the solar system and its use of ellipse. Stan, it's all yours.
I'm Stan Burkamp, coming to you from my classroom in Mays High School. And today we're going to talk about how geometry has played an important role in the history of physics and astronomy. So one of the big debates that happened in all of science was, what type of universe do we live in? Do we live in a geocentric, which means an Earth-centered and everything revolves around us? Or do we live in a heliocentric, meaning sun-centered, and the planets and everything goes around the sun? So when you look at how this played out, there were three big characters that formed this debate. First one is Nicholas Copernicus, who was a Polish monk, and he wrote the Revolutions of Celestial Spheres and published that in 1543. So following that, there was a Danish nobleman by the name of Tycho Brahe. Tycho Brahe was the first one to build his own observatory, and he had decades and decades of observational data about the motions of the planets. He had an intern there, worked with him for a little bit, by the name of Johannes Kepler. So Johannes Kepler was known as the wandering mathematician. And Johannes Kepler thought that his purpose in life was to develop the laws to explain the motions of the planets. So he took the data from Tycho Brahe and spent years coming up with his own laws to describe the motions of the planets. So the first one is what's known as the law of ellipses. Law of ellipses basically says that every planet orbiting the sun has an elliptical orbit path to it. And any ellipse has two foci. One is at the sun, and the other one is a point out in space. Out of that came the law of equal areas, which means that in a given amount of time, these two areas are the same. So what that means, here's an inverse relationship from the world of math. As the radius becomes smaller, the planet moves faster. When you're further away, the planet slows down. The third one is law of harmonies, and this relates the period of the Earth, and say, for example, the period of Mars to the radius of the Earth and the radius of Mars. So this was the toughest one to come up with just because of the math. So geometry is very important in biology as well, so I'm going to turn that over to Shannon, and she's going to talk about how that becomes such an important role in the structure of plants. Take it away, Shannon.
Hey everybody! Geometry really is everywhere, but you don't even have to leave planet Earth to see it. It's actually everywhere. In biology, we talk a lot about how form equals function. That means you can look at the shape of something or how it's put together, and that gives you a clue as to how it works. Take, for example, this picture of the human skeleton. Notice how the bones are put together in a particular way and particular angles. That allows us to move a particular way, just like me lifting to do this biceps curl. Take a look at this hinge joint, which allows for that movement. Form and function is not limited to land animals. Let's take a look at this barracuda. Notice his streamlined shape. That's what allows him to do short bursts of speed so that he can easily catch his prey. And when you're talking about critters in the ocean, you have to talk about the great white shark. Take a look at these teeth. He's got over 300 serrated, triangular shaped teeth, and look at the angle of those teeth. That's what allows him to catch his large prey, like sea lions and sea turtles. And for you bird lovers out there, you can tell a lot about what a bird eats by looking at its beak. Take a look at this dunlin. Notice how its beak is long and pointy. That allows this bird to forage in mud bottoms where it seeks out insects and small crustaceans. Compare that to this avocet. Look at the upturned sweep of its beak. That allows this bird to sweep the surface of the water looking for insects, small crustaceans, and sometimes even small fish. Compare that to this heron. His beak is much shorter and sharper. These birds use their beaks like spears, and they will spear their prey of frogs, fish, small snakes, and sometimes small mammals. Lastly, look at the crossbill. These birds have a beak where the top and the bottom part of the beaks cross, hence the name. These birds are really popular in highly forested areas because they're able to dig the seeds out of pine cones, hence the unusual shape. When scientists discover something new, they often look at its form to get an idea of what its function is. As always, stay curious.
I'm Dr. Lee Norman, Secretary of the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, a colonel in the Kansas Army National Guard, and a physician for more than 40 years. But most importantly, I'm a father and a grandfather. COVID-19 is spreading here in Kansas. It's in our big cities and our small towns. Please follow the guidance of your local health providers and county health department. Stay home unless you must leave for work or essential items. Practice social distancing, wash your hands, stay home, stay safe, and save lives.
I don't know about you, but it makes me want to go work out a little bit more and lift some weights after watching Shannon. So thanks for that. And although I said I was going to try to avoid some corny math jokes, it is time for one. What did the little acorn say when he grew up? Gee, I'm a tree. You get it? Geometry. Gee, I'm a tree. Speaking of trees, we're going to go to Heidi and learn about geometry in gardening. Heidi at Mays. Take it away.
Hi, I'm Heidi Alvin from Complete High School Mays, and I'm here to talk to you again about nature. Geometry is everywhere. In fact, have you heard of the Fibonacci sequence? The Fibonacci sequence is a series of numbers that starts with 1 and 1, and then every number after that is going to be the sum of the previous two numbers. For example, 1 plus 1 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, 3 plus 5 is 8, and 5 plus 8 is 13, and so on. This sequence appears in flower petals, in leaves, in branches, in seed pods, everywhere in nature. Math is everywhere, and it can be used by humans to get the most out of nature and to use it most effectively. For instance, in a garden.
Behind me is my 12 foot by 12 foot gardens. I've got 3 of these within this space. I'd like for you to take a look at what 144 square feet can do. I've got lettuce and broccoli, kale, radishes, arugula, tons of onions and leeks, and a bunch of red Russian kale. I used math to come up with this 144 square foot system. And I actually used a 3D parametric modeling software to find the geometry to make this work the very best for gardeners. I've used math and geometry to space all of my plants according to their needs. 2-inch spacing for radishes is just perfect to create a really dense bed of radishes. There are 90 radishes per linear foot. If it were not for a working understanding of dimensional and geometrical constraints with math, there is no way I would have been able to create this system. So this is a prime example of someone who had maybe struggled in math, really began to learn to love math when I was able to use it for my benefit. Once I was able to leverage math to make my life better, I fell in love with it. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Hello, I'm Kelly Holte, and I'm an ag teacher and FFA advisor at Mission Valley High School. One of the things when kids come into my class that they always ask is, when am I ever going to use math in ag? But I have some perfect examples of the ways that we not only use it in ag, but out in our shop as well. Whenever we go out into the metal shop or we're into the wood shop, one of the things that we usually have are framing squares or something to be able to help us build a project. Well, since we don't have that in our home shop, or even when we're at school, we use a simple rule called 3-4-5. Now that 3-4-5 rule is used in carpentry and in metal shops all the time, but sometimes we don't know where it comes from. So that rule actually comes from the Pythagorean theorem. And through the Pythagorean theorem, there's something known as the Pythagorean triples. And there's simple numbers used together in that theorem to be able to help us build that right triangle. So we're going to use 3-4-5, but we could also use 6-8-10 and multiples throughout for those triples. So 3-4-5 is the rule that we're going to use today to make sure that our projects are square and ready to go so that we can use them in our homes or in our classrooms. So to use the 3-4-5 method, you're going to need a tape measure, something to mark with, and then of course your project. So what we're building here is a small herb garden for us to be able to use in addition to our large garden outside. So on our corner that we want to make sure is square, we're going to use our tape measure to mark out. Now this is a smaller project, so we're just going to use 3, 4, and 5 inches. But if it was a larger project, we could use 3, 4, and 5 feet, or even 6, 8, and 10 inches. So first we're going to measure off 3 inches. Okay? As we measure off our 3 inches, we're going to mark at that 3-inch mark. You can see here I used a thumbtack because I'm using this by myself. Then we'll find our opposite corner. We're going to measure down 4 inches. Once again, we marked it with a tack. And then you can see as we come across, we have 5 inches. Okay? So with that 5 inches, we know that this is a perfectly square corner and we're ready to move forward. If we want to double check our... So as you can see, the 3-4-5 method is a really simple way to be able to take any corner that you need square. So for our small project, we use inches, but if we're using a larger project, we would use 3, 4, and 5 feet, 6, 8, 10 feet, or any of the Pythagorean triples. It's a really easy way to be able to bring geometry out into the shop or wherever you need it.
Hey parents, you're doing great! With Kansas school buildings closed and homes being turned into classrooms, parents and caregivers have expanded their roles in their students' learning. This is a new experience for most of us, so let's show one another a little grace. When you and your students start to feel overwhelmed or stressed, take a break. It's really okay. Keeping students interested and engaged in learning is the key to success. Remember, you have an entire community of fellow caregivers and teachers to lean on. Reach out. Together, Kansans can.
Construction and Pythagorean triples, they go hand in hand. The 3-4-5 triangle, the 5-12-13, the 7-24-25, we love those Pythagorean triples. Time for another corny math joke. What do you call more than one L? A parallels. Get it? Parallels? Speaking of parallel, Sam's going to talk about parallel structure in Buhler, Kansas.
Hi, my name's Sam Neal, and I teach English at Buhler High School in Buhler, Kansas. And we have been talking about geometry. And what in the world does geometry have to do with English? Well, I will tell you there are some similarities. What do geometry and English have in common? Both English and geometry use something that's called parallelism. So let's talk about geometry first. In geometry, parallelism occurs when lines on the same plane never meet or intersect. These lines are always the same distance apart. So I decided to go for a walk around town to see where it is that I could see parallelism, or parallel lines, which is probably what you're more familiar with. And here's what I found. The first thing I noticed when I stepped outside were my own front porch steps. Notice there's 3 parallel lines here that never intersect. And as I looked across the street at the trees in front of our school, I realized that there's parallelism in the landscaping. These trees will never touch. And finally, as I walked down the block towards our school, it seemed like there were parallel lines everywhere I looked, from the crosswalk to the handrails to the roof lines to the doors. So we know what this looks like in geometry, but what does it look like in English? In English, parallelism occurs when a writer uses the same pattern of words to show that 2 or more ideas have the same importance. So let's start with a sample sentence. I enjoy throwing footballs, hitting baseballs, and bike rides around town. When I look at this sentence, it does everything that it's supposed to do. But there's a problem. Bike rides around town. This doesn't match the other phrases in this sentence. Notice how if I change it to throwing footballs, hitting baseballs, and riding bikes, then it matches. Parallel structure, parallelism, is really setting up a pattern in your writing. What it comes down to is this. Geometry helps us to understand the shapes and the patterns that we see in our lives, whether it's parallel lines, triangles, angles. In English, with parallel structure, it helps us to set a pattern in our writing. And now, we're going to turn things over to Cheryl De La Cruz in Topeka.
Thanks, Sam. This is Cheryl De La Cruz from Topeka Public Schools, where it's always students first. Guess what, young mathematicians? I have an exciting geometric discourse for you today, and it's about this box. Yes, you heard it right. It's a pretty simple situation, but I want you to justify your reasoning with mathematics. So here you go. Would you rather push a 15-kilogram box of books up the hypotenuse of triangle A or triangle B? Let's hear it from some of our friends.
So using the Pythagorean theorem, I calculated that triangle A has a hypotenuse of 4.47 meters, meanwhile triangle B has a hypotenuse of 9.21 meters. Therefore, since triangle A has a shorter distance, I'd rather push a 15-kilogram box of books up triangle A.
Did he say Pythagorean theorem? Wow!
I'd rather push the 15-kilogram box up the hypotenuse of triangle B. The slope of triangle A is 1/2. The slope of triangle B is 2/9. 2/9 is less than 1/2, so triangle A is steeper.
Slope? Say what?
The angle of elevation of A is obviously larger than B. To be precise, it's about 27 degrees, while B's angle of elevation is about 13 degrees. So it's easier to push the box up triangle B, but since the hypotenuse of triangle A is shorter, I would rather push the box up its hypotenuse and get the work done quicker.
Angle of elevation? Check this out.
I would rather push the box up triangle B, because if you find the work meaning force times distance of the two triangles, you would see that triangle A has approximately 1,316 joules of work, while triangle B has around 294 joules of work, meaning that it would take significantly less effort to push the box up triangle B's slope compared to triangle A's.
And work? How about some physics integration? So there you go. You heard some amazing answers from some amazing young minds. What about you? Would you rather push a 15-kilogram box of books up the hypotenuse of triangle A or triangle B? Thank you so much, and take it away, Cindy.
Thank you, Cheryl. Now I understand when we have the conversation about would you rather go up a very steep hill on a bike or a long sloping hill on a bike, it's all around the Pythagorean theorem and work. And it's time for one more math joke. What did the triangle say to the circle? You're pointless. Get it? Because the circle doesn't have points. This concludes our second episode of Learning Across Kansas. This is made possible by a partnership between the Kansas State Department of Education and the Public Broadcasting Service. We want to thank them for their partnership. And thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Cindy Couchman.